All right, and we're live with Dr. Jordan B. Peterson. Dr. Peterson, thanks for being here.
Hey, my pleasure. Thanks for the invitation.
So you seem to be making quite a few people mad lately, aren't you?
I'm making some people very mad, but I'm making more people sane. So I think that's a price that's worth paying.
That's a good trade-off. I've heard you.
It's a good trade-off.
I've heard you talk about that in the past. For my listeners who aren't aware of you, you've been really highly requested. But for the people who aren't aware of what you're up to and kind of what's brought you to the book and everything else, can you give people a quick background on you and how we got here?
Well, I'm a clinical psychologist. I've practiced for about 20 years, so I've spent about 25 hours a week talking to people about everything you can possibly imagine, ranging from murderous seriousness to lightheartedness. And I'm also a professor at the University of Toronto. And I wrote a book about 20 years ago now called Maps of Meaning, which was an analysis of archetypes and belief structures. And then another one that just released today, actually, called 12 Rules for Life, which is a guideline to having a meaningful, honest, and productive life. But not just a guideline to that, but also a deep discussion of why you would actually want that. Not because you should do it per sort of way, but because everything just turns out better for everyone, including you, if you do that. And so that's kind of what 12 Rules for Life is about. I kind of rose to public attention, I would say, because of something I did 15 months ago. There was a new law that was being introduced in Canada that purported to extend human rights legislation in Canada to people of different gender identity or gender expression. But I read it as the entry of compelled speech into the Canadian legal code. And so it was the first time in Canadian history where the government was legislating what you had to say. And I thought, no way, that's not happening. No one's legislating what I have to say. So I made a video saying that I thought this was an appalling piece of legislation and that there was no goddamn way, under any circumstances whatsoever, no matter what, that I would abide by it. And that caused a firestorm of controversy that hasn't died down even a bit to this day. So that's me.
Well, that took you up to even just a couple days ago when you had the Channel 4 interview, which you were trying to kind of espouse your point of view, and she continued to kind of talk over and assume different things that you were supposedly saying without actually saying it. She was just putting words in your mouth.
It was like watching someone have a conversation with their imaginary friend who they had confused with you, except, of course, it wasn't an imaginary friend, it was an imaginary enemy. So she was talking to her imaginary enemy. And that happened to me, but I'm not her enemy as far as I'm concerned. And so that's kind of a non-starter.
So this is something that Scott Adams, he's the creator of Dilbert, talks about, where people hallucinate your viewpoints on on different issues to an enemy that they think they're fighting against. And just so my listeners know what some of these 12 rules for life are, from the table of contents: stand up straight with your shoulders back, treat yourself like someone you're responsible for helping, set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world, pursue what is meaningful, not what is expedient, tell the truth, or at least don't lie. And there's, 7 other ones as well. But the thing that the reason I wanted you on here was my site, my podcast is all about pushing your limits, doing the impossible, trying to reorder and rewrite the story of your life in order to be something more meaningful. And all of these things are really uncontroversial to me. Like, they're like, take care of your own stuff, take inventory of where you're at, and then go forward. And people are getting really riled up with you, and to me, it's common sense. It's straightforward, and it's stuff I've been talking about for the last 5-7 years. Yeah,
well, I mean, the funny thing is that it's often what's most obvious that needs the deepest defense, because you forget why it's true. Mm-hmm. And so what I tried to do with 12 Rules for Life was to lay out these rules, and I would say they're fairly straightforward, but then to discuss at length and in as deep a manner as I possibly can why it is that they're true. So standing up straight with your shoulders back, for example, that's a good example. That's the first chapter, and strangely enough, it's about lobsters, or a large part of it is about lobsters. And that's an attempt to show that the manner in which we size each other up, say, and the manner in which we distribute respect is based on neurological systems that are almost unspeakably old, 1/3 of a billion years. So the lobster nervous system runs on serotonin, just like our nervous system does. And if a lobster loses a dominance dispute, it won't fight afterwards. If it has a fight and loses, then it won't fight for a while. But if you give it antidepressants, essentially, then it'll fight again. And you think, well, so what? And the answer to that is, well, yeah, so what? It means the system in you that governs your own conception of your status is 1/3 of a billion years old, and it has certain principles. And one of those is that people are much more likely to take you seriously and to contend with you if you organize your posture properly. It's fundamental, and you're more likely to take yourself seriously and much less likely to be victimized and that sort of thing if you stand forward confidently. And so it's a deep meditation on the necessity of doing that. I mean, your grandmother said, like, don't slouch, but there's a reason for that. It's a great practice of habit. I should tell you, too, something we should do. I have this program called self-authoring. And you're interested in helping people find their best. What I should do is send you a code for your users so that they can have a discount. So we'll set that up, okay?
Okay.
We should figure out a code.
I've done the self-authoring program, and I've done the Understand Myself. And the interesting thing about the Understand Myself, I was going to save this to the end, but we'll just get right into it. But the interesting thing about the Understand Myself one was when I took it, this is something you talk about, the edge of, free order and chaos and pursuing. A lot of times when people are talking about improving themselves or changing things, they're talking about going after freedom.
Yeah.
And it's gotten to the point where it's almost it's saturated. And
how much goddamn freedom do you want anyways?
Well,
Kierkegaard, when Kierkegaard was writing in Denmark 150 years ago, he said even then that too many people were trying to make life too easy, and that his goal was to try to make life more difficult, because actually people want some damn difficulty. There's no doubt about that. So yeah, enough freedom. Time for some responsibility and some load, man.
So this is actually probably the topic I wanted to talk to you about the most was rule number 7 is pursue what's meaningful, not what's expedient. And one of my pet theories is that human beings, so I just finished running 7 ultra marathons on 7 continents, raising money for a charity, and I hate running. But what I
so what's an ultra marathon?
Anything over 42 kilometers or 26.2. So I ran anywhere between 50 kilometers and 100K. And my pet theory is human beings need a physical struggle. There's a chemical release that happens when you're into that stuff. When you finish the races, there's a certain feeling of accomplishment, and the lack of it, and you don't want to say life's easy because some people have hard lives, but
yeah, that's for sure, man.
But sometimes the lack of the physical ease, like, okay, you don't have to struggle doing back-breaking labor and actually like see a house built or something like that, but sitting behind a computer or not having connection to the work, that's something. Peter Thiel has this question: what's one thing that's true that almost nobody agrees with you on? And everybody's talking about 4-hour work weeks, how to do things faster, 4-minute abs. And the thing I've always come back to is people want to struggle, but you want to have struggle connected to something larger. And I think that ties into number 7, which if you want to talk about for a second.
Yeah, well, that was the hardest chapter in the book to write. That just about killed me, that damn chapter. But it's exactly that. It's a description of I would say it's a description of the phenomenological reality of mankind. And I know that's a mouthful, but phenomenology is I suppose you could call it the way experience manifests itself to you if you included your motivations and your emotions and everything else, your dreams and everything else into the equation. And the way reality manifests itself to people is tragic, because we're vulnerable and limited and mortal and all of those things, and also touched by evil because terrible things happen in the world. And so that's the basic reality, is that life is suffering, and a lot of it is inflicted by malevolent forces. It's not just tragedy, it's not just earthquakes, it's concentration camps too. And that evil is not, the limitations are definitely in you, they're in society, they're in the natural world, but the malevolence is also in you and in society and in the natural world. And so it's a pretty damn rough landscape to traverse. But then the next question is, well, if that's the landscape, then what should you do when you're in it? And the answer is something like, well, the old Christian answer was pick up your goddamn cross and, march up the hill. And that's actually a really good answer, except the answer is even more sophisticated. Pick it up voluntarily. Pick up your damn load. Like, life is hard. You've got things to do. Reduce suffering. Constrain evil. Those are your jobs. And it's hard. And what's so interesting about that, and I think this is incontrovertibly true, is that if you do that, the more you do that, the more bearable the fact that life is tragic and malevolent becomes. It's like, and I was so thrilled when I started to piece that together, because I thought, well, what's ineradicably true? And I talked about this in chapter 7. It's like, well, life is pain and there's evil. Those things are true, man. There's just no denying that. No one with any sense denies their own pain. So then, than that, and then you would say, well, what's truer than pain and evil is what defeats it, because it's stronger. Something is stronger, can defeat it. And then, well, telling the truth, saying the truth, living out the truth, and picking up a burden, those defeat pain and evil. It's like, oh, okay, isn't that something? So yeah, pick up your goddamn cross and march up the hill. Don't be such a whiny, pathetic. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just, there's nothing in it for you, man. Get at it.
So one of the things that I think, looking at this from a third party standpoint, I think one of the things people get upset with you is that you're just describing like the mess that we're all in. You're kind of describing, okay, there's oppression, there's, obstacles, there's difficulties. Some people have more difficulties than others. And then your solution is not, I think what people get caught up in is they want to look around themselves and they say, hey, look how unique my specific mess is. And then someone else says, oh, well, mine's a little bit different. And someone else says, okay, mine's a little bit different. And people get so caught up looking at their own mess instead of looking at the message of what you're saying is it doesn't matter what your mess is. Everybody's mess is going to be slightly different. But you can look around and figure out, how do you get your stuff in order. And you have something on.
Yeah, well, people are upset. I would say that people who consider me reactionary, a word I'm not very fond of because it's a cliche, think, well, what about the systemic problems we all face, the problems of large-scale structures? It's like, look, large-scale structures have their problems, but what makes you think you're in any shape to fix them? The people that I've worked with people who have fixed pathological large-scale structures like multi-billion-dollar corporations. And the reason they could fix them is because they had put themselves together and they were formidable. And without that, they couldn't have done it. So it's like, yeah, you want to go restructure the patriarchy. It's like, more power to you, but bloody well, make sure you're the guy that can do it. You have to be a giant slayer to restructure the patriarchy. And you're not going to start your victorious streak by fighting giants when you're a little tiny, like, demented dwarf with no weapons. You're just going to get stomped, or you're going to do something stupid. So you got to. And so what I'm not telling people at all that there aren't large scale things to be done. There certainly are. I'm saying have some goddamn humility and make sure that you're not making things worse when you're trying to make them better. And also, it's not that easy to clean up your room. Like if you live in a house where chaos rules and every bloody room is a disaster, and it's been like that for 10 years, as soon as you start cleaning up your room, the nasty people you live with, who you call family, are going to be in there thinking, well, who the hell do you think you are? Like, you think you're better than us? Like, why do you think that's so important? It's just stupid. Quit it. You're getting above yourself because you're starting to make them look bad by your example. And so to straighten out your room in a situation like that, you also have to start fighting back against the most vile impulses of you and your family. It's not an easy thing to put a small place together. It's really hard. And you end up interacting with systems that are far outside of you in a way that you wouldn't expect at all. So
one of the things you have a section on The Cocktail Party by T.S. Eliot where one of his characters is having a hard time, and he comes to the psychiatrist and says, I've decided that all of my suffering is my own fault, and I can't.
I'm hoping, she says, it's a woman. She says, okay. I'm hoping that all my suffering is my own fault. So, yeah, and the psychiatrist says, well, what the hell? Why in the world would you hope that? And she says, as far as I can tell, it's only one of two ways. It's either me causing all this grief and misery, or it's the world. And if it's the world, I'm just screwed, because what the hell am I going to do about that? But if it's me, well, then maybe there's some things I could fix that would start putting it together. And it's like, oh, I thought that was so brilliant. It's so brilliant. And it's right. It's like, even when you're arguing with someone, I've learned this arguing with my wife and I have learned this. So, for example, in our relationship, when we got into a fight that we couldn't resolve, and we're starting to hammer on each other and starting to try to win, because you want to win the argument. You can't win an argument with your wife because you're going to wake up beside her tomorrow morning, right? You can't win an argument. You have to settle it. But sometimes it degenerates into winning. And we learned to go off into opposite rooms and sit and meditate. And the meditation was, okay, well, I'm obviously, having a terrible time with this scheming character that I've hogtied myself to for the rest of my life. And she's clearly wrong about everything. And I wish she'd just go away. But maybe I did something, I'll sit there and think, maybe I did something like a little bit stupid in the last 6 months that made this situation worse than it had to be. So imagine I'm thinking, it's like she's 99% wrong, that's for sure, but maybe I'm 1% to blame. And so that rule was you go in the other room and see if you can figure out where you're 1% to blame. And so then you think, okay, last thing in the world you want to do, right, when you're in that kind of state of rage, victorious rage, think, all right, what did I do wrong? You think, oh. Then it comes to you. You think, oh yeah, that was kind of stupid and weak. And you're kind of embarrassed about it. And then you go into the other room and you tell the person, all right, like, there's nothing you said that was right, but here's something I definitely did that was wrong. And then she tells you the same thing. And you think, okay, well, we're both pack idiots and now maybe we can talk. And so even if you can see around you, assuming you're not deluded, that most of the problem is outside of you, there's still a tremendous amount that you can fix by taking responsibility for even the small amount that you're adding, and it's under your control. So that's a really good thing. It's so helpful.
I think that's the first step out of when you're talking about like resentment and bitterness. That's like looking at your own things. And I actually had a friend. Well,
it also makes you powerful. It's so weird because you think, oh, I'm a victim and all these terrible things are happening. It's like, yeah, terrible things are happening. No doubt about it. But then all of a sudden you think, well, I could take a small step in the right direction. It's like, oh, that means I'm the sort of person who under terrible circumstances could take a step in the right direction. I'm not so goddamn weak after all. There's more to me than I thought. And so that's a really that's why I think the message that I've been, let's say, distributing has been so popular, because I don't tell people, you're okay the way you are, man, don't worry about it. I say, look, you're completely goddamn useless. It's like the rest of us. You could be way better than you are. And people think, oh, I didn't think I was so great. My life isn't what it could be. I could be more than I am. That's so good. That's so wonderful. So yeah, so that's really helpful.
There was a quote that you had, I don't think it was in your book, but it was something, you're not who you could be. And there's an immediate reaction to something like that where people will take it as an offense, and they say, okay, well, you're insulting my potential or whatever, exactly. But it's actually like,
it's a compliment.
It's a compliment, and you're saying there's a lot more to you than where you're at. So
yeah, exactly. It's exactly that. That's the problem with the self-esteem movements. It's like, no, you shouldn't be feeling good about yourself. You should be feeling good about who you could be. And that's just way better. It's because look, if you let's say you talk to a 23-year-old guy and he's trying to get his life together, and you say, hey, look, you're fine the way you are. It's like, well, fine, I might as well just jump off a cliff right now because there's nothing left to do. And if you say instead that, what the hell do you know? You don't know anything. You're not educated. You're not sophisticated. You're full of bad habits. You've never taken any responsibility for anything. You don't know how to solve any problems at all. Like, there's way more than you could be. And then the guy thinks, oh, well, now I've got something to do for the next 70 years. It's like, well, that's a way better bargain.
So when you're talking about the, moving towards your potential, there's the two different motivators. It's, okay, who could you be? And then the other exercise I think you do in self-authoring is if you did everything.
What sort of hell could you find yourself in?
If you just go to your base instincts, and what does that look like? And if you want to talk about understanding what hell looks like for you, and then kind of just that exercise and then extrapolating from that.
Oh, it's so helpful because when I see people in my clinical practice, let's say they don't like their job, and they say, well, I'm afraid to look for a new job. It's like, yeah, no kidding. You might not find one, and you have to put your resume together, and then you have to go get interviewed, and you have to shake up your life. Maybe you have to move. It's like and then there's the devil you don't know. It's like, yeah, no wonder you're afraid. It's like, okay, fine, you're afraid, and that's stopping you. The problem is you're not afraid enough. That's the problem. Let's lay out what you're like in 3 years if you keep this job. Oh, and they think, oh, Jesus, that's not going to be good. I don't like my boss. I'm going to be bitter and resentful. I'm going to be 3 years older. There's going to be less possibility. I'm not going to be making the money I have. I might even get fired because I hate the job. It's like, yeah, man, that's what you should be afraid of. And so in the self-authoring program, we formalized that. We said, look, okay, use your imagination. Oriented yourself that way, but I bet you have a pretty good imagination for hell. So fine, take all your bad habits and your weaknesses and your resentment, and then imagine they get the upper hand. And you're in the worst place that you could reasonably be in 3 years. What does that look like? Everyone knows what that looks like, man. They know. You know what that's like when you wake up one morning after you've been out, maybe you've been partying a little too hard and you did 7 stupid things that you regret. And you're all hungover and feeling miserable, and you think, oh my God, this is what I've sunk to. It's like, yeah, no, it isn't. You can sink way lower than that. And so you just imagine what that's like. That'll get your fear behind you, pushing you forward. And that's unbelievably useful.
I think that's one of those things where you mentioned the self-esteem movement and people talking about following your passion and doing all these things that sound really fun and kind of this surface level happiness. And the thing that I've always come back to is the things that were really, really difficult and almost miserable, and like you're swearing against yourself, in the moment of it. Those are the things, both the accomplishments that mean the most to me. Those are the things where I learned the most about myself. And then the thing I always talk about is that's the edge of your limits. That's like where you test yourself, and then you find out there's a whole new world past that. And when you can push into that, you don't do that by being comfortable, by doing the easy thing, by staying happy. You do it by testing yourself to the point of failure, and somehow
well, you need a T-shirt. You need a T-shirt that says more difficulty. Well, it's the same thing. Yeah, because you want to be on that's the edge of order and chaos. You want to be on that developmental edge, and you're on that developmental edge when you're pushing yourself past your limit. Mm-hmm. And you don't have to do it to the point of breaking. But I tell you, one thing that's really useful at one point in your life, and this I think you should do in your 20s, is you should push yourself past your limits to see where your limits are, right? You should work yourself to the point of exhaustion just to find out where that point is. And then you should back off because, you want to live for 30 years or 70 years past that. So you don't want to auger yourself into the ground. But you should find out how much you can lift in metaphysically and physically. And this is for men in particular. Like, women have a call to adventure, I think, now, because they're so encouraged to develop career and family. But men need a call to adventure, and the call to adventure is like, get the hell up, get out there, get at it. There's things to be done, man. Put yourself together. So
I think one of the reasons why your message resonated with me specifically was that was my story when I was graduated school. I had a business degree and all these other things, but couldn't get a job anywhere, couldn't get a call back from Starbucks, and sat around feeling like everything I wanted to do, I did all the things you were supposed to do, and everything seemed impossible. And then the whole concept of the site and the podcast and everything we're doing now is impossible isn't it's not a limiting factor. It's not a statement. It's a challenge. And the idea is you take these things, you put them out there, you aim for it, and then when it's done, you cross it off. So that's the whole point of the site and the logo and seeing you articulate it from
this is what Jocko Willink is telling his people too. It's like, quit whining, get the hell out there and do something useful, because it'll be way better for you. I'm afraid all my people here are telling me with all sorts of sign gestures that I have to vanish. So I should do that. I'll get my son to contact you and get a code for your viewers, okay? We can do that right away. And maybe we can talk again in the future for a little bit longer. That would be good.
Yes. Good luck with the rest of your launch, and we'd love to have you back on when things slow down for you, all right?
Okay, really nice talking with you, and thanks for the invitation.
All right, thanks.
Okay.